Thank you all, and thank you for joining me in this conversation. I'm going to talk about policy and research, two very different worlds. At least we come to assume that they're very different. But I do want to start first with some assumptions and also with a bit of a confession. The assumption is that the work of policy people, policy makers, is designed to try and improve a situation, improve the life prospects of people, improve the conditions under which people live. And that assumption equally applies to researchers. Researchers have the same goal in mind, the same ambition to try and affect in a positive way the people or the subjects, the clients, however you'd like to describe it, that they work with. Let's keep that assumption in mind, because as we talk about these two different worlds, we're going to see that they come together and pull apart in very different ways. The confession is, and this relates to the purpose of a TED Talk, at least as far as I could determine it from using Google to figure out a TED Talk. The purpose of a TED Talk is to convey an idea, something that will be very compelling, that will assist in moving people to action, provide them more information, have some impact in some way. I have some ideas today. I hope they will have that effect, but I can't guarantee it. There's a big difference between having an idea and having a way to put that idea into action and positively affecting people. So let's get started. I titled this Mind the Gap. Two important words. The gap we're referring to today is the gap between policymakers and researchers, the people, but also the world of policymaking and the world of research. How different are these and how closely can we bring them together? And is it a good idea to bring them together? The word mind I'm going to use in two different ways. We're going to use our minds, the noun, use our minds, that part of us that thinks, that reasons, that we can apply to a problem. And we're also going to use the word as a verb. We're going to mind that gap. We're going to pay attention to it. We're going to attend to it. And we're going to try and address that gap. There is a caution here. The caution is if we're going to undertake this little journey in the amount of time that we have, we're going to play in three different realms. We're going to play in astronomy, because we're going to talk about two very different worlds and kind of the forces that bring them together or take them apart. And we're also going to talk about psychology, because we'll inevitably talk about our beliefs and our reasoning and our emotions. And we'll probably talk a little bit about astrology, because there is a certain mythology and mystery about these two worlds that we might have to confront. So what do we mean by these two worlds? The world of researchers, the world of research. Research is a search for information, an effort to create or gather information in a pursuit of knowledge to have some effect. There are steps in research. I'm not going to go through all the steps, but you can see that no matter what kind of research someone is undertaking, qualitative research, quantitative, large group, small group, randomized controlled trials, quasi-experiment, there's lots of different ways to do research, but generally they follow the same steps. You'll note at the bottom, one of the steps is some form of communication, reporting, making something public in some way. World number one, researchers. World number two, the world of policymakers. Let's start the same way. What's policy? Policy is really something that defines a course of action. A course of action authorized or approved by public authorities, because we're talking about public policy, that is designed to address a problem, deal with an issue. And through some miracle of science, we also have 8 steps in policymaking. Now, I may have played around with these steps a little bit, but there are 8 steps. And it starts, of course, with a problem, similar to research. And it ends with communication. So it is possible, when we look at these two worlds, that we can see something coming together. We can see some common elements. Both are dealing with problems. Both have some way of collecting evidence. Both have some desire to communicate and most important to me anyway, both are concerned with trying to confirm, uncover, determine what works now and how to make something work better in the future. That's really important. Now, these common elements are drawing these two worlds together. There is a bit of a problem here. The problem is that these two worlds don't use the same decision-making processes, and they don't use the same evidence. As a policymaker, when I consider evidence, or when I'm required to consider evidence, I have to think of not only the evidence brought forward by researchers and experts, but also by advocates, by parents, by the people receiving services and programs themselves, by the media, almost by anyone who would like to offer evidence. And one of the aspects of living in a policy world that's really important is that you can't dismiss evidence very easily. You can't say to people, we don't care about what you think. Decision process in policy is also quite unique because it's a public process with public authorities with elections at some point. That's very different from the evidence gathering in research and the decision making in research. So these two worlds are not coming that close together now. Is there any way, though, to keep that gravity pulling them back? We know there are common elements. We know they'll never have the same processes in evidence or decision making. But we know there are common principles and common desires. People do want to accept the differences between these worlds, and they do want to acknowledge the different accountabilities. We're accountable in different ways to different people, and that means in some way we're going to have to keep our distance. We have to find a way to work together, but we also have to find a way to acknowledge that we will never work the same with exactly the same purpose or goal. Is that possible? Can we find a way to do that? I wouldn't be here if I didn't think there was a way to do it. And I think one of those ways has to do with trust. It has to do with facts, not advocacy and pitching. Researchers don't want to hear me talk about great policy. And to be honest, I don't want to hear researchers talk about how wonderful their research is. I want to know the facts and the reality. It's up to each of us separately to figure out how to take advantage of that. Now, to me, that sounds like, here's the great wonderful idea, that sounds like a matchmaking exercise. It sounds like some mixture of Match.com and LinkedIn and Monster.ca. We need a way to find a method to create a relationship. I need to say what I'm interested in and concerned with, and researchers need to do the same, and we need to find a way to match our interests and concerns so that in some way these two worlds can start to overlap, but not totally overlap. I had this up earlier. I'm going to end with this. The basis of a strong relationship, whether it's a relationship between policy and research, relationship between people, relationship between parents and children, there's a trust that starts. Without that trust, the rest of the relationship won't happen, and the dating exercise won't be complete. Thanks very much.